The wine tastes like ash in his mouth. Damocles sits on a throne of gold, a feast spread before him wide enough to feed a village, and he cannot eat. Above his head, tied to the ceiling by a single strand of horsehair, hangs a sword. Its point hovers just above his skull, close enough that he swears he can feel the cold of the metal on his scalp. One breath too deep, one wrong tilt of the head. That is all it would take. This is the story of the most envied man in Syracuse, and the one day he learned exactly what envy costs. Before the sword, there was flattery. Damocles was a courtier in the court of Dionysius II, tyrant of Syracuse, a city built on grain, wine, and gold, and held together by fear rather than love. Everyone in that court had a skill they used to survive. Some were soldiers, some were spies. Damocles had one gift, and he used it constantly. He knew exactly what a powerful man wanted to hear, and he was never far from Dionysius when the moment came to say it. "My king," he would say, bowing low, "how fortunate you are. Wealth beyond counting, armies at your word, a palace of marble, and gardens heavy with orange trees. Surely no man alive has ever been so blessed as you." He said it once. He said it a dozen times. He said it so often that the other courtiers stopped listening, the way you stop hearing a fountain running in the corner of a room. Every time Dionysius answered with the tired smile of a man who has heard the same compliment so many times. It stopped meaning anything years ago. But this time, something in the king shifted. "You think my life so enviable?" Dionysius asked, setting down his cup. The hall went quiet. Even the musicians in the corner seemed to play a little softer. Damocles, sensing an opening, leaned in further. "Who would not envy it, my king? You want for nothing. You command everything you see. Your enemies fear you, and your people praise you in the same breath." Dionysius studied him for a long moment, the way a man studies an insect he hasn't yet decided whether to crush. Then he smiled, not the tired smile this time. Something sharper, something almost curious. "Then you shall have it," he said. "For one day, Damocles, you will be me." Nobody laughed. Nobody dared. By the next evening, it was arranged. Word spread through the palace before the sun had even set. Damocles was dressed in robes of deep purple, the color kept for kings alone, stitched with thread that caught the light like something alive. Servants lined the hall on either side of him, heads bowed as he passed between them, closer to him than they had ever stood before. Musicians filled the room with strings and low, rolling drums. Perfume drifted through the air, on cushions of rising smoke, thick enough to taste. A banquet was laid before him that could have fed 50 men. Roasted meats glazed in honey and studded with almonds. Bowls piled high with figs, dates, and split pomegranates, their seeds glistening like rubies. Wine poured from pitchers of solid silver, the good vintage, the kind normally locked away for foreign kings and funerals. Guards in polished bronze stood at every entrance, not to threaten him, but, he was told, to protect him, as they protected the king every single day. Damocles lowered himself onto the throne, and for one full, glorious moment, he felt it. The thing he had always imagined power must feel like from the inside. Untouchable, adored, free. He reached for his cup, already composing the story he would tell about this night for the rest of his life. Then he looked up. There, directly above his head, hung a sword, a real one, unsheathed, its edge catching every flicker of the torchlight. It hung from the ceiling by nothing but a single hair pulled from a horse's tail, thin enough to see torchlight through it, thin enough to imagine snapping in the smallest draft from an open door. Damocles froze. Did the other guests see it too? He searched their faces for alarm and found none. They went on eating, laughing, refilling each other's cups, as if a blade suspended by a hair over a man's skull were simply part of the evening's decoration. Perhaps, for them, it was. He did not touch the wine again. He did not touch the food. His eyes stayed locked upward, tracking the faint sway of that hair every time a servant crossed the floor, every time a door opened somewhere behind him, every time the air in the hall shifted even slightly. Could a single hair really hold a blade steady for an entire evening? He no longer wanted to find out. The musicians kept playing. The wine kept flowing. Nothing around him had changed. Everything inside him had. Minutes passed like hours. The perfume that had smelled rich now felt suffocating. The purple robes that had felt luxurious now felt heavy, like something meant to hold him in place. Damocles sat rigid on the golden throne, a king in every outward detail. The robes, the crown, the servants at his call, the guards at every door, and felt nothing underneath any of it but the cold, constant certainty that his life could end at any moment, without warning, without a sound, without so much as a chance to finish his sentence. Finally, he could not bear it any longer. "Please," he said, and his voice cracked as it left him. "Take me off this throne. I want no more of this feast, no more of this wine, no more of any of it. Take the crown, take the robes. I beg you, let me go back to being nothing." Dionysius, who had been watching the entire time from the edge of the hall, allowed himself a small, satisfied nod, as though a private theory had just been confirmed. "Now you understand," he said, walking closer, his voice low enough that only Damocles could hear it. "This sword hangs over me every single day of my reign. Every plot I don't yet know about. Every rival waiting for the right moment. Every man who smiles at me in daylight and sharpens a blade after dark. I have simply learned to eat my dinner underneath it. You called my life enviable, Damocles. Tell me, do you still want it?" Damocles said nothing. He didn't need to. He was already halfway to the door, moving faster than a man in royal purple has any right to move, and he never once asked to sit on that throne again. This story survived for over 2,000 years, for a reason. The Roman statesman Cicero recorded it in his writings on the good life, using it to make a single, uncomfortable point. The things we envy from the outside rarely look the same from the inside. Cicero wasn't especially interested in Dionysius as a villain. He was interested in Damocles as a mirror, a stand-in for anyone who has ever looked at someone else's life and quietly assumed it must feel as good as it looks from a distance. That's the trap, and it's a remarkably durable one. Not the wanting. Wanting things is normal. The trap is assuming that getting them removes the fear, instead of simply changing its shape and moving it somewhere closer. Think about what Damocles actually envied that night. Not the wine, not the robes, not even the crown itself. He envied the appearance of safety, the idea that enough wealth, enough status, enough control over other people's lives would finally let a person exhale. What he discovered in a single evening is that power doesn't remove the sword hanging over a life. It just relocates it directly overhead, tied there by something thinner than he had ever imagined possible. Modern research on power tells a strikingly similar story, just in different language. Dasher Keltner, a psychologist at the University of California, Berkeley, has spent decades studying what actually happens inside people once they gain authority over others. His research points to something he calls the power paradox. The very qualities that help a person rise, warmth, openness, empathy, generosity, are often the first things to erode once they arrive at the top. Position doesn't just change what a person is now able to do. It changes what they're suddenly afraid of losing and how constantly they find themselves scanning the room for the threat. That's the part Damocles never saw coming, sitting down at that banquet. He assumed the throne would remove his anxiety, the way a locked door removes a fear of intruders. Instead, the throne gave his anxiety a permanent address directly above his head, swaying gently with every draft that entered the hall. And here is the uncomfortable mirror this old story holds up for the rest of us, sitting nowhere near an actual throne. How many people spend years chasing a version of security that turns out to hang from the exact same thin thread the moment they finally reach it? The promotion that was supposed to bring relief, but instead brought a new tier of people to answer to, and a new fear of losing the title entirely. The relationship that was supposed to end the loneliness, but instead brought a new fear of losing someone who now has the power to leave. The house, the platform, the following, the acceptance from a group that once felt out of reach, each one promising the exhale, each one arriving with its own quiet sword, already installed overhead before the celebration has even finished. Why does this keep happening, generation after generation? Partly because envy is a poor judge of distance. From across the room, another person's life looks finished, solved, secure, complete. Nothing left to worry about. Up close from the inside, almost nothing feels finished. There is always another version of the sword waiting. A different shape, a different thread, but the same angle. The same silence in the moment before it's noticed. The same quiet realization that comfort and exposure tend to arrive bundled together in the very same package, whether the setting is an ancient Sicilian palace or an ordinary Tuesday. Even Dionysius himself never got to put his sword down for good. Ancient historians describe a ruler who lived constantly guarded and constantly suspicious, reportedly so wary of assassination that he had his own daughters shave his beard with a razor rather than let a barber anywhere near his throat. The man who staged the demonstration for Damocles wasn't teaching a lesson from a position of comfortable safety. He was teaching it from directly inside the fear he was trying to explain, using the one prop guaranteed to make a stranger understand it in under an hour. So what do you actually do with a sword that can't be removed? You stop mistaking the absence of a visible threat for the absence of any threat at all. You stop assuming that the people who appear most secure, the ones with the titles, the following, the corner office, the applause, have somehow escaped the same thin thread everyone else is quietly living under. And you get honest with yourself about which kind of security you're actually chasing. The kind that genuinely lets you rest, or the kind that only looks restful from where you happen to be standing right now, outside of it, looking in. Damocles got his answer in a single evening and asked to leave before dessert was even served. Most of us never get the demonstration laid out that clearly. We only get the throne, the wine, the applause we worked so hard for, and years later, if we're paying close enough attention, the faint sway of a hair we never noticed hanging there in the first place, right above the seat we were so sure we wanted. The moral of the story is, power doesn't remove the fear of losing everything. It just gives that fear the best seat in the house